Hello and welcome back to the channel. You find me tonight outside St John's Church here in the High Street of Glastonbury. The reason being is tonight we're having hustings. All the 5 candidates standing in the election on July the 4th are coming in, and the people of the town are coming in to question them. Now my role in this is merely to record. I will record everything that goes on, and I will publish everything that goes on with no editing. So what you see is what happened. The idea being, if you couldn't make it tonight, you can still see what these guys have got to say, and maybe that will help make your mind up. Oh, for now, we're off into the church.
Well, good evening. It's lovely to see so many of you here. And thank you for the many questions that you have put in the box at the back of the church or you have emailed. There are far too many questions to be home before midnight, so we have condensed some of them. Just a few kind of housekeeping things to say. The first is, if you hear a fire alarm, ignore it. We don't have one, it's not ours. So please don't run out. The second is, on a more serious note, if there is a reason to leave the building, you will see the fire exits marked in the right way, and there are lots of people who are stewards here tonight who will direct you in the appropriate places. Rather than me do sort of an aeroplane design, you will be able to see them if you need them. The rules of the night, to make it easy, as you can hear as I'm speaking to you, there is a wonderful echo. So if you get very excited by a particular answer or indeed a question, there is no point, I say this very strongly, there is no point in shouting it out, because I won't hear and neither will the candidate. Please put your hand up, keep your hand up, and Kieran, who you all met as you came in, he's the other one with a dog collar on, he has a roving mic and he will get to you as quickly as possible so you can answer your question. Hopefully the answers to the questions for each candidate will be 2 minutes each or less, so I'm afraid we will call time on those 2 minutes, otherwise again they could talk for as long as a vicar, and I know you don't want that either. It should be a very enjoyable and lively evening. I hope that by the questions that we've condensed we get a cross section, but if there is a question that is burning to you and it's not been asked, again, do pop your hand up and we will hopefully get to you and you will have an opportunity to ask that. There will be times of a break for all of us, actually, in terms of just a 2-minute sort of breather, because I know, no I don't, because I sit up here, these seats aren't always that comfortable, so every so often I will call time and you can just have a shuffle or stand up, and in this instance the candidates can sit down rather than stand up. Okay? So I think that's fairly clear. Can everybody hear me okay at the back? Brilliant. And if we could just say your names each so we can check that everybody can hear you at the back, please.
Tom Carter.
John Cousin.
Sarah Dyke.
Hal Huberman.
Faye Purbrick.
Well, I think they deserve a round of applause before we start. So this being the first question, I will tell you that they have been primed with this question and this question only, and we'll start with Tom and work down to Faye. And this question is this: if you were elected as our MP, what would be your main priorities?
Oh, good evening. As I just said, my name is Tom Carter, and I've lived in Glastonbury now for all of my life, bar some time spent in the British Army, and at university I've been here raising a family and teaching. I've got 3 boys, aged 15, 12 and 10. On Saturday, it was his birthday, and I'm married to a nurse who works at a GP surgery, so I have some insight into the workings of a GP surgery. Now, why am I here? For me, it got to the point last autumn as I was driving around and I was thinking about my eldest boy going out into the world and the state of this country as I hand it over. And I felt a bit ashamed and embarrassed that what chance has he got of being able to afford a home? The fact is we need to fast track these housing developments, these brownfield sites, and find new ways of building housing. They've got these amazing modular houses that are built off-site and put together like pieces of Lego, cost a fraction of the price to make, a fraction of the time, half the cost of heating. I think about him going to university, and I think that university has been missold to a generation on the promise of improved employment prospects. Students are going off and getting themselves into £40,000–50,000 worth of debt, and what is quite often happening is the fact that there is no real work at the end of it. And unless you graduate on £60,000, you aren't even going to keep up with the interest. So Reform talk about the idea of scrapping the student and interest just to give those students a chance to be able to make some progress. The cost of living crisis is my biggest concern. We've got to put more money in the hands of the hard-working families who are sometimes having to choose whether to heat their home or put food on the table. There's currently 4 million children living in poverty in this country, 1 million of which are near destitute, so they can't even afford the basics of food, shelter and warmth. And yet as a country, we're quite happy to spend £85 billion on quangos, where some of these bosses are on £600,000 and the consultants are on £1,000 a day. I think we need to readdress our priorities to help the poorest in this country. Now, how to pay for this? There's money there in terms of reforming the public services, and I'm talking about particularly the management. If we look at the management of the NHS and the civil service that's currently standing at about 500,000 people, it's bloated and ineffective. So by reforming the public services, there's money there that we could use to help these tax cuts. And an idea that's come and been suggested by previous deputy governors of the Bank of England, where we stop paying interest, perhaps you read about this in the news over the last couple of days, but we stop paying interest to commercial banks on the reserves that they hold with the Bank of England, depending on the base rate, some 20 to 30 billion pounds. So for me, I have a dream that my boy could go to university and actually pay off his debt, that he could buy an affordable house and settle down and have a family, and that family be able to live on a single income. And that's something that hasn't been achieved in over a generation. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Hello, everyone. It's wonderful to be here in our beautiful church here in Glastonbury. My name's John Cousins. I'm the Green Party representative here tonight, and I'm looking forward to all your questions with some trepidation, but anyway, we'll move forward on that. If elected, my priorities are 4 that I think are really, really imperative. And these 4 really reflect something about Glastonbury too. Number 1 is housing. Just the lack of housing, the need for appropriate housing, and the need for housing that actually fulfills what we need in towns across the constituency, in the villages across the constituency. Glastonbury did a housing needs survey, and unsurprising, what came out was the need for houses for younger people, people who are just starting out on their journey into families, and of course houses for older people too. However, the developments that happen in this town and across the constituency don't reflect our housing needs. So that needs to be addressed. Homes for young families, homes for older people, more social and affordable housing, and the right for local councils to build council housing. The second priority is one that's close to my heart, and that will be to improve public transport. And that means more investment in bus services, including community transport, such as the Slinky bus or the buses that are on demand. And a regular bus service, it's not rocket science, is it, to Castle Carey Station. How that isn't there, I don't know, but it's still not there. I think that is a case of political will. And of course, wouldn't it be wonderful to open up a station at Langport or Somerton, which would be even closer for Glastonbury and more direct, and you could actually get a bus there even now without any changes to public transport. So public transport is a big issue for a lot of people, and it needs a lot of investment. Then we have the situation with our rivers and sewage. I think that that's really important for our area because of the Ramsar site that's over here on the levels in moors. The phosphate issue on the Ramsar site is preventing us from developing and preventing lots of things from happening here because the phosphate situation is so bad. So I think we should be working with Natural England, with the Environment Agency, with developers, with the river authorities and the drainage authorities, farmers and the parishes to identify short-term solutions that will get developments happening and a longer-term solution too. And finally, my fourth one is to remove the freight route designation on the A361 as it runs from Kennard's Grave to the B&Q roundabout here. Thank you very much.
Thank you. It's been an honour and a privilege to represent my community over the past 10 months as the MP for Somerton and Frome. This is my home. I'm a farmer's daughter, my brother is a farmer, and my family have been farming in this area for over 250 years. Speaking to people on the doorsteps, I hear time and time again that our country is crying out for change. Under this Conservative government, everything is broken. Every day, people tell me that they can't get an appointment to see their GP, they can't find an NHS dentist, and they can't get the help that they need to support an older relative. Our health and care services have been driven into the ground by the Conservatives, which is why we have pledged to provide 8,000 more GPs, giving you a guarantee of an appointment within 7 days and putting an end to the dental deserts. Under the Liberal Democrats, personal care would be free and based on need, not on ability to pay. Now, here in Glastonbury, you've seen 2 of your 3 pharmacies close. 75% of pharmacies are losing money. So is it any wonder that 10 pharmacies are closing every week? But community pharmacies are vital to our health service and our high streets. That's why I will fight for the urgent funding needed to keep them open. Liberal Democrats are also committed to ending the scandal of raw sewage being dumped into our rivers. And we've been at the forefront of holding the water companies to account for the damage that they've done. Now, I've been an environment activist for many years, and as lead member for environment and climate change at South Somerset and Somerset Council, I introduced the blue recycling bag so every resident in Somerset can recycle more from their doorsteps. I declared an ecological emergency to sit alongside the climate emergency, and I led on a new 10-year tree strategy for Somerset. I introduced e-scooters into Yeovil, encouraging people to ditch their cars for short about-town journeys. And I took the strategic lead on a project to install EV charging units in public car parks across South Somerset. I've also taken the lead on many community-facing initiatives, such as the Great Parish Tree Giveaway and the Wildflower Giveaway. I led on No Mow May and rewilding projects on roadside verges and marginal green spaces, helping to create corridors where biodiversity can thrive. So as a proud Green Liberal Democrat, I have a proven track record on taking positive steps on climate change mitigation and will continue to do so. So after years of chaos and neglect with the Conservatives, let's take this opportunity to make change. I stand for hard work, honesty and integrity, and I'm the local champion this area needs.
Thank you. Thank you to Glastonbury and this wonderful... Okay, excuse me. Thank you to you all for coming. Thank you to the church for having us. It's lovely to be in Glastonbury, though this is not the walk in the park that the half-term treats of visiting the town were when I was growing up. I love where I come from. I was born in Yeovil. I went to state school in Bruton. My sisters went to Strode. My uncle lives between Glastonbury and Street, and my dad ran a bar in the Avalon field at the festival for a number of years. Bar humbug, it was called. Now that I've reminded you all of that old phrase, I do hope that it doesn't come to mind too much tonight. I know that we deserve better from our government. I believe in the good that a Labour government can and will do for all of us here in Somerset. After 13 years of the last Labour government, no one was in any doubt about the scale of what was achieved. The list is long, and I could keep you all in this lovely church all night. Millions of pensioners and children lifted out of poverty. Record high satisfaction levels in our NHS paired with record low waiting lists, and the longest period of sustained economic growth in our history. Now, 14 years of the Conservatives, and what do they have to show for that? Locally, we drive on pothole-ridden roads, we languish on NHS and dentistry waiting lists, whilst families are ripped apart by unaffordable housing? Do you feel better off now than you did 5 or even 14 years ago? It is time for change. Labour's 5 missions for government lay the foundations for the genuine, long-term rebuilding of Britain, not just some sticking plaster gimmicks designed for headlines. It's a fully funded and comprehensive plan for national renewal. As your Member of Parliament, my main priorities would be simple: championing our beautiful part of Somerset. That means being visible and available to support you, pushing in Parliament for what you need and deserve, and making sure that we benefit from the best of a Labour government. Fighting for more social and affordable housing so that those who grow up, particularly in places like Glastonbury or Bruton, can afford to live and work there if they want to. And I will stand up for integrity and ethics in our politics. The Tories have trashed trust in our politics. In everything I do, I will stand up for restoring your faith in politics. I will always live locally. I will never take a second job. And I will support Labour's plan to clean up Westminster with a new independent Integrity and Ethics Commission.
Good evening, Glastonbury. It's really good to be back in the church again today. Now, the question that I got asked was, what are my priorities if I become your MP? And my priorities are based on the conversations that I've been having with many of you and people across the constituency over the last 9 months or so. And they're the priorities that you tell me you care about, and I want to use the skills that I have to deliver them. I've delivered in business, I've delivered as a councillor, and I can deliver for you as your MP. So one of the first things that we've been talking about is health. And I know that the NHS is struggling post-COVID, but we've got a dental recovery plan that was introduced in February and is starting to see new dentists come online. And we need to make sure we continue with that plan and train more of our own dentists so that we can continue to deliver that into the future. We've heard mention of the pharmacy closure, which I was involved in the protests about when Boots was leaving the high street last year. And I've been in touch with the NHS to push forward on what we do to get a new pharmacy. And one of the first letters I will write, one of the first phone calls I will make if I become your MP, is to find out what is the blocker to the pharmacy who wants to come to Glastonbury and why aren't they here. And I also want to push to make sure that the West Mendip Hospital has the opportunities that we're seeing roll out across community diagnostics under the Conservative government, and see what we can be doing here in Glastonbury with that. Now, we've also talked about regeneration, and this town has secured £23.6 million to give back to this community. But what I'm hearing more and more on the doorstep is you're concerned about how that money is being spent and making sure that it's cost effective and delivering what you as local people want. Now, I think St Dunstan's with the Health and Wellbeing Centre is an exceptional project. I've been supporting it for a long time, and I hope that more things like that will come forward that effectively spend that money. But one of the key things that we need is an enablement project to make sure that illegal encampments can be addressed, that people can feel safe on the streets with the extra 558 police officers that are already available in the Avon and Somerset, and the 8,000 extra that are pledged by this Conservative government to do community policing. You say you want to be kept safe. I want to see those people here. We need a joined-up plan for transport. We need sensible solutions for the environment, and I'm sure we'll touch on these over the course of the evening. But education and business is the key way that we will level up people in this area. Security is the key thing that government should do for an area, and that is what I will do if you elect me as your MP.
So it's very kindly set their stall, and now we come to the questions that I'm drawing out from the box. And the first question is this. Nationally, the Trussell Trust reports a rise in food bank numbers and usage. Here in Glastonbury, the need to help people to eat has also risen over recent years. What do you propose to do to reduce food poverty and reduce the gap between rich and poor? Carol, would you like to answer that first, please?
Yes. If I'll just find my notes first on that one. I think this is all of our nightmare being come to first without having found our notes. Very important question. In 2008, when Labour was in government, I think there were just 22 Trussell Trust food banks. There are now over 3,000. It's clear the trajectory in which our country's been going on the cost of living crisis and inequality. Child poverty has gone up by 700,000 under the Conservatives, with over 4 million now growing up in a low-income family. On the cost of living crisis, Labour will bring down the cost of energy by creating Great British Energy, making Britain a clean and green energy superpower, reducing the costs of bills. Labour will reduce food prices by removing barriers to business trading. We'll make housing more affordable by building 1.5 million houses by the end of the next Parliament. And our New Deal for working people will make work pay, will ban zero-hours contracts, end fire and rehire, and reform the remit of the Low Pay Commission to make sure that the minimum wage is matched with the reality of the cost of living.
Thank you. Obviously, nobody wants to see any family struggling. And for me, the most important thing that we can do for any family is support them into work and improved education. Under the Conservative government, we've seen education standards rising so that young people who were born just as the government changed are now the 4th best readers in the world, the best readers in the Western world, with the 11th best at mathematics. And that bodes well for the future for those young people. But my job as your MP will be to attract the businesses that can create those jobs for those young people and to create the work with our colleges so that we can reskill those who can go into those high-skilled jobs. Because the best way out of benefit, the best way out of needing food banks is to support people to be able to do better for themselves.
Do you think the current government helped to reduce food poverty, or do you think it's actually helped to increase food poverty?
I think we've had a cost of living crisis on the back of COVID, on the back of the Ukraine war, and what we're doing we've doubled the tax-free allowance, we've almost doubled minimum wage, we're focusing on jobs and education, we're giving families free childcare so that they can afford to go to work and create those good role models. And ultimately, we are also making sure that families have good role models for their young people so that they can go out and do well. Do I want there to be less food banks? Absolutely. Do I think that there are more things we can do to help educate young people in terms of food and the best ways to stay healthy? Absolutely. But I think we're working along a plan, and I would like to see us continue with that plan.
Yeah, thank you. It's a really good question. It's obvious there are far too many families who can't afford enough healthy and nutritious food. You know, I was doing some research on food banks, and it's unbelievable that there's more food banks in this country than there are McDonald's restaurants. Both are pretty appalling. So for me, being a farmer's daughter, it's absolutely crucial that we get more food and better food security in this country. We're about 53% food secure here. I held a debate in Parliament around food security just recently. We've also got to try and help our farmers get a fair price for their products so that we can absolutely guarantee that they are actually producing the food that we need for our tables, but also securing our farming for the future to the best environmental standards. And that way, we will get the best food for our young people and make sure that they have the best nutritious food available to them.
Well, I'm sure everyone has seen the impact of the situation in Glastonbury. I had the honour and pleasure as the Mayor of Glastonbury to open our community pantry, which is a joint project we put together on the side of the town hall, supporting the amazing group Love Glastonbury, who also do a fair share scheme, and of course we have a food bank in the town. And while these things are absolutely fantastic for Glastonbury and to help support people, they actually, as we've just heard, belie the real issue, which is poverty. I'm always mindful when I think about poverty of what Nelson Mandela said when he was released from prison and he was talking about it in South Africa. He said, poverty, like apartheid, is man-made. And poverty is a political issue. It's not just because people are not going out to work or whatever. It's about opportunities that we have as a community. But the Green Party would support people back into work. Our policy is £15 an hour minimum wage for everyone, including young people. So it's a level playing field for work. We would also invest in supporting the farming community as well, tripling the money that comes to farmers. I'll stop there.
Yeah, so one of my passions is helping those people.
Can people hear Tom from the back? Because I'm conscious that those that are on the end here, it's difficult. Is that a no?
Okay, a bit louder. Is that better? Okay. Yeah, so one of my passions is to help the poorest families. So for me, that's the main driver behind getting into politics. I would like to see the tax threshold being raised to £20,000 to put more money in the hands of hard-working families, and actually Reform talk about the idea that they would support a married couple so that they're able to transfer 25% of their tax allowance, so that's £25,000 that could be tax-free. So I think there's a way there to be able to increase the money they take home. The other big bills are going to be the housing and energy. Energy, I'd like to see the bills capped and cut down, and we can do that by removing VAT and the renewable subsidies. I think the subsidies for the renewables, they've got to come to an end now. The renewables need to stand on their own 2 feet for a while now. Energy in this country is very expensive. We're currently paying 44 cents per kilowatt hour, and you compare that to America, 17 or 18 cents. India, China are paying about 7 or 8. So affordable housing, as I said at the start, these modular homes that can be built in a fraction of the time, fraction of the cost, fraction of the cost to heat, and then a real push in terms of being able to raise that tax threshold, which will allow people to escape this benefit trap that I hear of all the time, where they can't work beyond 16 hours. So not only helping those who are working, but also helping those that are stuck on benefits.
Thank you very much. Anybody like to come back to any of them over what's been said about food banks? Sorry, just provide the phone down here. Thank you. That's all right.
I just like to point out, in case anyone's got short memories, there weren't any food banks until the Tories got in power in 2010. So for this candidate to stand there and go like that, wonderful things are going to go to do to food banks is just hypocrisy.
Thank you.
We're here now. We're here.
No?
As a trustee of the food bank, I'd like to point out to you that a lot of the recipients are in work.
Yes.
They're in work. All of you were talking about getting people into jobs, but they're in jobs. But the jobs are not sufficient for that ever. Just it was more problem. Something to break down, and they're in desperate need.
Hi, my name is Emma King, and I'm part of Fashion Independent Alliance. We were the people who organised the protest for the Conservative Chums gate crash. We organised it because the Boots pharmacy was closing, and essentially we heard nothing from the Tories about it. They turned up on the end, got the protest taken, had a bit of injuries, and then went away without talking to any of us. They've had no involvement whatsoever with the pharmacy saving the pharmacy campaign. That's been organised by Glastonbury Hustings and Councillor Paul Manning, who's sitting right next to me. So I find it really offensive that the fact that she turned up to have a protest and then tried to claim it as the fact that she cares about pharmacies. If she cared about pharmacies, maybe her government wouldn't put us in a situation where they're all closing. So actually, I find it really ridiculous. Do not blame for this woman, because she quite clearly will just hijack anything for her own ends.
Yay.
David, am I allowed to respond to that?
Yes. Kieran, just down here, please. Would you like to respond to that one?
I never said that I organised the protest. I said I attended the protest. And what I have done since has been following up with the NHS and pushing through all angles with the Health Secretary, the CEO of the NHS, and I've been tracking it through. And as I said, the frustration that you have about the fact that the new pharmacy is not there is one that I've been pushing with the CEO of the NHS and talking to the outgoing MP to make sure we're prioritising that as well. So I turned up, I kept talking, and I've talked to many people over the last 9 months about it. I congratulate you on organising it. I never said I did. I said I attended a protest, and I would never look to take anything away from the local community. I think there's some great stuff that goes on in Glastonbury, and I hope to support it as your MP.
So, do you want to say something to that as well?
No, I didn't at all. I think she said enough.
Okay. We'll take two more, please, from the floor.
Oh, hi. I don't know if this is the right time to ask this, I hope so. You're talking about nutrition and nutritional food for families and people in general. I just wonder what's going to happen about the sort of things that have been sprayed, the chemicals that are sprayed on the food, into the soil. You can't grow nutritional food on bad soil, and it's plain what's been sprayed in the skies. I think we need to look at those about the conditions of our growing things for farmers.
I'm happy to I'm very happy to answer that. I used to, as a farmer's daughter, and I used to work for the Soil Association, which is the organic food and farming charity. So I'm very well aware of some of the chemicals that are put on our land. And I would certainly be looking to make sure that we help support our farmers move to more environmentally friendly farming to be sustainable and viable for the future, because we need to balance that environment focus as well as producing good food for our tables. Now, I spoke to a farmer some time ago, an arable farmer, who said he was a conventional arable farmer, and he said he would never eat the bread from his farm. He would never, ever give it to his children. And that, to me, has stayed with me and speaks volumes. We must move to a more environmentally friendly farming system here in the UK and support our farmers in that transition.
So I wholeheartedly agree with Sarah on the need to transition away from the current practices. I also grew up on a dairy farm, so I'm a little bit familiar with what goes on the ground. And in Glastonbury, it's been quite an issue for our community, and I'm very pleased to say that Glastonbury, the Town Council, has banned the use of herbicides and pesticides on public land. I would like to see that rolled out across all farmland too, and helping to improve soil health and biodiversity are things that the Green Party really are striving for. And so with the support of government backing, we can encourage farmers to move away from chemical herbicides and pesticides to a more sustainable farming solution. Thank you.
Yeah.
Well, I just thought it was worthwhile mentioning the need to reopen trade links with Europe.
Yes.
It's not included in the country rights and I think that has a lot to answer for. Also, Labour, the Europeans brought into this country, but did so much for our health and social care services, and the shared education links as well with Europe that benefited so many of our children over the last few generations, all lost.
Yeah.
Just before we move on to the next question, all I will say to finish up this local debate is to say that as a local vicar, I'm astounded that every single morning, Monday to Friday, parents of all walks of life, they drop their child off at school and then their next point of call is to the community fridge.
Yeah.
It's great. So my next question is, what will you do over the state of social care? What will you do over the state of social care? And I'm learning as we speak. I'll give you a few seconds to get your notes out. So Faye, I think you're ready to go by this, so would you like to start?
Social care is something that we need to change.
Stop again. Can you hear that?
Social care is something that we need to adapt. The growing older population is going to cost more to care for effectively, and we need to make sure that we're doing that in the right way. When I was a Somerset County Councillor, we increased the funding for the pay of social care workers. And one of the things I used to get really cross about is people saying, oh, social care workers can do that and then they can become a nurse. No, social care is a profession. It's something we need to recognise. It's something we need to put the training in place for, and the recognition for people that they can come in as an entry-level social worker and work up through. It's not just older people who need social care. There are a huge number of working age young people who need to have that care as well. And there are different types of social care. It is not a one-size-fits-all, and we need to recognise that, create a profession, There is a plan to do so. It's one of the things that is a skilled job, that is something that we can get young people to aspire to. And for me, apprenticeships and vocational training are one of the things that are going to be key to helping young people get well-paid jobs. And it is about well-paid jobs and skills. And that is something that I will fight for. We've got the right resources in the local area to deliver that training. You can become a social worker at Yeovil College and train and get a job. We need to stop saying social work is something that people do while they're waiting for something else. It is a noble profession, and we need to recognise that.
Tom.
Yeah. For me, social care is a concern of so many people, and I think it's something that needs to be looked at from top to bottom. I think that's the point about reform, is the fact that it's going to do a root and branch review of everything that's going on and find a better way of doing things. It needs to be a national concern, as opposed to, at the minute, there seems to be a split between the NHS and your council. So it needs to be something that's looked at from a national point of view. I think the price of care generally is too expensive. I've had a friend that's put a relative into a care home recently, and the fees are £1,000 or £1,200 a week, and it's far too expensive. They need to be capped. We need to recruit more staff, so we've talked about the idea for carers having 3 years of paying no basic rate of income tax, and training has to improve for the professionals and also for those caregivers that are looking after a family member. And having spoken to a carer this week, she said one of the key things is that it needs to help the recruitment of the rotas, because the rotas at the minute are every other weekend, and if you've got a family, it doesn't really work. Hence, a lot of people aren't coming into the profession. So I think with a few tweaks, we could recruit a lot more staff.
Thank you. Yeah, really important question. Our social care services are in crisis. There's hundreds and thousands of people in England waiting for care. Many are stranded in hospital beds due to the lack of care home space. And the Conservatives have broken their manifesto commitment to fix the social care crisis. But the Liberal Democrats will ensure that nobody has to live in limbo. Nobody has to sell their homes to pay for care. We'll introduce a free personal care based on the model introduced by the Liberal Democrat government in Scotland in 2002. We'll create a social care workforce plan, establish a Royal College of Care Workers to improve the recognition and career progression, and introduce a higher carers minimum wage. And we'll also establish a cross-party commission to forge those long-term agreements that are needed for sustainable funding on social care.
Thank you. John.
So we're all going to tell you, aren't we, that it's in crisis, and we've all got a cunning plan to sort it out. And the question I guess you've got to ask yourselves is which party is actually going to fulfill their promises when they get elected. And from previous experience, we know that not many do. The Green Party's position on social care is that it should be free at the point that it's needed, just as the NHS should be. So free at the point of use for everybody. And we would invest £20 billion a year into social care as part of an overall package and see it integrated in the National Health Service, which we would also put £50 million a year into. And this is what's required. We've seen the cost of social care go up in our county, and we've seen the lack of taxes, your council tax, not going up, has resulted in the crisis being even worse. We have to, if we're determined as a community to support people who need social care, we're going to have to make sure that we pay for it, but that it's free at the point of delivery. And I'm afraid that means taxes, not tax cuts that you hear about all the time. We all can see what tax cuts do. They mean no services.
Yeah, you've heard it already. Social care is in crisis. It's the prime example of 14 failed Tory years. They promised comprehensively to deal with it a number of times, including manifesto commitments. They haven't. My family here today is fresh from trying to solve a social care crisis of our own, proving just how difficult this is. Labour is not promising the land of milk and honey immediately because of the state the country is in, but immediately we will improve paying conditions for our vital social care workforce by establishing a fair pay agreement in adult social care. Yes, excuse me. Long term, Labour is committed to creating a national care service, just like we created the National Health Service. We will be working with local councils, social care providers and the local community to do just this.
Question from the floor on what you've all heard. Anybody like to make any comment of any sort? Down here, thank you. Just here, thank you. And then the person in front of that, thank you.
Thank you. As we look around this room and all see one thing that's going to happen to us is we're all going to get old. There's no affordable housing, and those of us that were able to buy our homes, we're grateful for that. But the biggest thing that happened to this country is in the 1980s, the Tories said, buy your homes, leave a legacy for your family, and become landowners. Then what did you do when you got into power and the elderly got out and they needed care? Sell them. There's no legacy. Sell your homes. Use that to pay for your care. Privatisation care homes, absolutely diabolical. You pay too much, you get so little. My in-laws were in a home in Manchester. One was in one severe unit for severe dementia, the other in nursing dementia. £6,000 a month each. I couldn't see where that went, but I knew it was going on profit because it was a Bupa home. However, when COVID hit and my father-in-law got COVID, we couldn't visit. The ambulance came to take him. The hospital couldn't take him because he had particularly unpredictable dementia. So it was the care workers in that home that saw him through that. He eventually died. But they became his family. They became the last face he saw. And I think that the Tories who have blood on your hands for every crisis the NHS has gone through, COVID's gone through, and the wars that we see now.
Thank you.
That's what my vote.
Thank you. Back to that.
I would just like to say I'm very sorry for your loss and what you went through with your family. I could talk about the plans for social care, but I don't think that's what you want to hear. I'm very sorry for your loss, and I hope the same doesn't happen as you grow older. And with the Conservative government, we will make sure we're protecting that.
Hang on, sorry. I just had Sarah respond to that as well.
Oh, sorry. I think the words that you were saying were hugely pertinent. It was Boris Johnson, wasn't it, back in 2019, who said that no one would have to sell their house to pay for care. But yet in 2020, more than 17,000 pensioners were forced to sell their homes to pay for social care. That is the state that this Conservative government has led us to.
Hang on, sorry, I must stop.
The NHS that paid into it.
Yes, please.
I just wanted to say that so many of the problems are the thing of Thatcherism and Reaganism, that thing of listening to idiots like Milton Friedman with their fantasy economics of just devil take the hindmost, sell everything off. Now the roads, the companies fill them with sherbet, as soon as it rains they just come up and get in charge of the council again, rather than it being the Board of Works. I just can't understand what was ever wrong with using part of the nation's wealth to look after the actual people, rather than just looting the money, taking it offshore, and that situation we've had over 40 years now, where the corporations and the super rich have opted out of the tax system. And they're allowed to opt out of the tax system, because they've got the Yeah, it's just looting.
Okay, can I
set up with
stop
a
there?
charter, lootocracy.
Hal, would you like to come back to that in particular?
I agree with everything that was said.
Don?
I think the thinking was, or the theory, that if it went to the private sector, is that it would become more efficient. I know it doesn't, and I know. And history has proved that wrong, because just look at water, for example, that was privatised in 1989. And I heard today that they paid out some £80 billion in dividends, which is more money than they took in over that period. So there's a great example in profiteering and greed. And I think things like social care, water, energy, food, your basic things need to be secure and under our control.
John. It's been a real revelation, these hustings, because I find myself in a peculiar position of agreeing with Reform UK.
He said it too many times, John. He said that so many times, John, haven't you? Yeah. Come on.
So, I mean, but what is different about Reform UK and the Green Party is that we would tax the super rich. They get away with murder, don't they? So we would tax the super rich. The tax burden should be on the broadest shoulders. And so we would raise tax from not just the super wealthy, the billionaires, but also annually we would charge tax on assets. Assets above 10 million, we would charge 1% tax on. Assets above 1 billion, we would charge 2%. We could actually raise enough money to reinstate the National Health Service without blinking if we tax the super rich, and that's what we should do.
Have a question at the back, I think. Is that right?
Just wanted to ask, I've worked in social services for about 20 years in this country, so I've seen a massive rise in our thinking over the last 14 years. It's an incredible rise, but it's massively related to the cuts in social care and the lack of integrated services. So we see people on the street getting incredibly unwell, people die on the street, people die in accommodation. Those numbers are going up. So I'm not seeing it in class, the employment services where we're getting these officers who have got the streets. We have mental health services that understood the needs of these people who are traumatized, with huge history of trauma in their lives. This is childhood trauma all the way up. Taking drugs to self-medicate, that they obviously kind of mental health, all people on the streets. This is a massive gap in the services. And I think if we can help this, it's a little bit helpful to my shout, my corner, to say, can we help this group? Because we just need, very simply, two things. Can we just have some better quality housing with better trained staff who can keep people in? And the second part is to have centres and sustainment teams that we had years ago, to keep people in, often can have life skills within independently. The idea of centres and sustainment teams on speak to them regularly, to keep up that emphasis to make sure that person can stay in their organisation, that we lose that expensive, damaging process of someone ending up homeless on the street.
Thank you. Sarah, do you want to come back to the end?
I'm afraid I didn't hear a lot of what was said there. It was quite distorted.
Okay, Faye.
Absolutely. We need to link up services to be able to support people. And that's one of the things that's been introduced with the Integrated Care Board, bringing together social care and the NHS to try and stop people from falling through the cracks. I think during COVID, we had the Everybody In scheme, and we managed to support a lot more people. And there are lessons that we need to learn from that to protect people. Mental health is something that is very close to my heart, and it's something that we need to continue to improve upon and link up. Mental health parity with physical health is a really important thing for me, and it's something that I will be pushing on. But we are starting to see good work between the third sector, the NHS, and social care, but we need to do better. We've got great examples of it, of what we've done with veterans to get them off the streets, and I'd like to see those models rolled out to help other people.
Thank you, John.
So it is interesting, and I've tried not to say this, but it is hard to listen to the Conservatives who've been in power for so long say that they've got a plan to sort this out, when they should have been sorting it out all the way through. Social care should be integrated with National Health Service, should be free at the point of delivery, but more importantly than that, when I was on Mendip District Council, I asked the council officers how many people are on the waiting list to how many houses we've got. There were at least 4 families waiting for every one house that was available. What that means is there are not enough social houses. Why? Surely it's a no-brainer. We should be building more houses for common people.
Yeah.
The chair. I've lost Kieran for a minute, but is there anybody around the middle of the chairs who might like to ask me? Julie, was that your hand almost going up there? Yes. Okay, Dan, please. Yes, it's the last question. Move on to the next main question. Thank you.
So this year, I have had quite a lot of experience in working with the mental health support team, both as a teacher, and head of year, but also as parents. I find it quite interesting that the Conservative candidate has mentioned that they want to reform, this service, when actually most of our young people can't access it.
Yeah.
The waiting lists are horrific. I've got young students that may wait 2 years to actually get mental health support. And so then kind of each crisis point is anywhere in situations where actually they then end up in hospital due to being in such a poor state of health that actually they get the help they need. So I'd like to know what they're going to do to reform this.
Who'd like to answer that first? Tom, thank you.
Yeah, mental health is a concern that's very close to my heart. And we have to start young when it comes to dealing with anxiety, depression. And I think the argument to be made for having a school counsellor in every school is a really valid one. I think the earlier you can get help and intervention, the better it is. Because the fact is, if you're struggling, having this talking therapy at the right time it can be life-saving. I do feel that beyond that, you have to spend some time in counselling, and I'm sure there's a number of people in here that have gone through that process. You have to then sort of own it and move on. And I think it's really important then that these young people have the access to be able to move on with a bright future and look forward to be able to finding a job or an apprenticeship or attending university, being able to afford a home. And I love the idea of then, okay, not national service, I think we're saying that's not a great idea, but actually a real part of that recovery process is helping people to go out and volunteer and spend time in their community doing some good with some purpose.
I'd quite like to push this point a little further, actually, to say that when I first came here 35 years ago as a mental health social worker, there were 500 beds in Mendip for those who had a mental illness. Within 5 years, that particular hospital closed down and a new site was opened in Wells, and there was a 16-bedded unit, acute unit for those who were acutely mentally ill. We now have, for the whole of what used to be Mendip, 1 acute bed. 1. Please, would you like to comment? Because it does come back to what Julie was saying about mental illness.
Well, mental health is really something I care passionately about. I was very pleased to hear Faye mention the Health and Wellbeing Centre that Glastonbury Town Council is putting together with the Town Deal. Health and Wellbeing Centre is going to be something we desperately need. If we can't get a pharmacy by then, and I know that Paul's doing a tremendous job on sorting this out, but we could always put a pharmacy in the new Health and Wellbeing Centre. That would be an idea. I have been a director now, a trustee of the new Glastonbury Mental Health Network, and we've been looking at various ways in which we can support the members of our community. And I think that it's a real testament to our community that we have so many amazing things going on, the snug, etc. But the biggest problem here is for the government to recognise the issue of mental health and take it seriously. And that is what requires the political will to do so. And I'm not sure that I trust any of the parties, apart from the Greens, to do that. Thank you.
As the parent of a mental health survivor, I recognise everything that people are talking about in this room, and I've made it my mission throughout my time as a councillor, and I will as an MP, to make sure we address this issue. I do think there has been progress. I still think there is a long way to go, and if you want somebody who's going to be an advocate for that, who's witnessed it firsthand, then that's what you will get with me. I agree that sometimes there is a crisis where we need beds. But when my son was in that position, I was told that the best place was at home with the family, and we worked to try and make that work for him. But the NHS were there to support us. But I do think that we're really good at crisis, but we're not good at the bit in between. And I welcome mental health support in our schools. I don't think that's one individual in every school, because some of our schools are too small. But we do need to have that provision. We do need to make sure that's part of teacher training. And I know from people who've been through the programme recently that it is. But we need to go further, and you will not find anybody on this panel who will fight harder for that than me. And we need to keep going with the integrated work that is happening and build that resilience into our schools, into our NHS, and into our young people.
Yeah, I think you've just found somebody who will fight harder than you, Faye, because the NHS is in crisis. It used to be the envy of the world, didn't it? The Liberal Democrats believe that people should be in control of their own lives and their health, and physical and mental health should be in parity. So we would improve the early access to mental health services by establishing mental health hubs for young people in every community and introducing regular mental health checkups at key points in people's lives when they're the most vulnerable to mental ill health. And I just want to come back to from my farming experience, because I was delighted to go to Frome Livestock Market very recently, where they've set up mental health hubs and health hubs for farmers, because we know that suicide rates in the agricultural industry for farmers is the highest of any industry in this country. And farmers are isolated, they're worried, they're facing financial risk. So there is no more important time for us to be able to support our farmers. And I've done a huge amount in Parliament in the last 10 months since I've been there. And I will continue to fight for mental health awareness for everybody, so that we get the recognition that it deserves.
Thank you. In order that we have as many questions as possible, we've got about an hour left. I'm going to suggest that the candidates might just take a 2-minute breather. If you want to just stand up or stay where you are, it's absolutely fine. And we'll come back in just 2 minutes. So the next question is this. Antisocial behaviour is a serious issue in Glastonbury. What will you do to end the blight of crime on our high streets? Tom.
Now we're down to one microphone, I think, aren't we? So shall I? You're going to move it across. Okay, yeah, antisocial behaviour. I've been a teacher for the last 20 years, so I'm well aware of the difficulties that this causes. I think in terms of Glastonbury, that it's been renowned for being, to attract certain characters, and I think we need to return to some sort of basic, old-school policing. At the minute, I think we've got a few PCSOs that seem to do a half-decent job, but the feedback I hear, can you hear me okay? Is that all right? Yeah. The feedback I hear is the fact that the approach is just too friendly. I was talking to my dad the other day that's sat here this evening about how policing was when I was a boy, and there was one police officer called Ginger Harris who was a serious chap, and he wouldn't have taken a friendly approach. And that sense of actually needing some more, we call bobbies, of course, men or women on the beat, with the ability to deal with antisocial behaviour with a zero tolerance approach. And I think that goes right across to all ages, including those that are young. And currently I work with students that are out of school and some that have a lot of difficulties with their behaviour. And I think, again, the idea of getting to them young and setting up youth clubs, work groups, so that we're able to provide them with an outlet apart from antisocial behaviour and misbehaving. Thank you.
So as you can imagine, being on the town council, this is quite a big issue for us and has been. And I remember a time when there was a knife attack not far from here, and myself and the vicar were on the front page saying that we need to sort this out, and out of that came some work that we've done with the police and kept doing with the police, and we've been fostering as a council relationships with the police. We've formed a town centre crime reduction group, and we are always supportive of the police. I remember the inspector coming, and he said what he loved about Glastonbury was wherever he went in Somerset, people said to him, what are you going to do about the situation? When he comes to Glastonbury, we say, what are we going to do about the situation? And I think that is the way forward. We have to work with the police and with our community and keep on being strong and vigilant around reducing crime. And if you look at the statistics, you might be surprised because crime has actually gone down in our high streets.
Thank you. Well, the Conservatives have talked tough on crime, but they've failed to get even the basics right. There have been unnecessary cuts that have contributed to the rise in serious violence, and the police are simply overstretched and under-resourced, frankly. And communities like Glastonbury are plagued with burglaries, fraud and antisocial behaviour that we know, and so many criminals are just getting away with it. And also violence against women is now horrifically high as well. And there's a huge court backlog, which is denying victims the justice that they deserve. And our prisons are in crisis as well. So the Liberal Democrats will restore proper community policing. We will invest in a criminal justice system to tackle the backlog and improve rehabilitation in prisons, and on release, strengthen offender supervision in communities to break that reoffending cycle.
Thank you. A huge problem across our constituency, and I think Glastonbury has seen the worst of it. I will proudly support Labour's plan for a new neighbourhood policing guarantee, focusing on policing but also the community, with 13,000 more community police officers. I think it's important on the immediate issue of antisocial behaviour in our town centres and on our high streets. We will create something called a respect order, which will ban persistent offenders from those hotspots of antisocial behaviour and crime. I think it's important, it's not been touched on by the panel. Of course, enforcement is important, but we also need to look at prevention and rehabilitation. In our prisons, we need to have more learning opportunities and pre-release plans for those in prison to then come out and not just go through a process of reoffending.
I think looking at it locally, one of the things we need to do is get to grips with the elusive public space protection order and make sure that the police have got the teeth they need to do the work that they need to do. Crime is down over the last 14 years, particularly violent crime, and prosecutions for rape are up by over 300%. That's not rapes up by over 300%, but the prosecutions. We need to make sure that we're giving the police the tools to do the job. And one of the challenges that I see is making sure that our rural area, Somerset, gets its fair share from Avon and Somerset, and that the Labour Police and Crime Commissioner doesn't turn all their attention on Bristol and Bath, which is one of the reasons I welcome the 8,000 extra fully warranted officers, whereas Labour's 13,000 won't be fully warranted, officers who will be available on our streets. And one of the conversations I had with the Home Secretary last month was about making sure that that focus was on rural crime, supporting our rural areas and our market towns, and that is what you will get with a Conservative government. Crime coming down, police going up, prosecutions going up, and what we need to then do is make sure that rehabilitation is working, and there's some amazing groups working just over in Boltonsborough who are doing a great job of that as well.
Thank you. Any questions following their remarks? And then behind you, Kings.
Question for everyone, Pam, actually. But firstly to Faye, so we keep hearing from you, we're going to do this, we're going to do that, we've got a plan, we've got 14 years to do it, why aren't you doing it now, why haven't you continued to do it? And everybody else on that was criticising the Tory government, which is understandable. I'd like to know what you think the Tories' proudest moment is in their time in government.
So if you didn't hear that, the question was, what is the Tories' proudest moment in the last government?
Am I answering the first question that you dealt with me?
Yeah.
So what I will say to you is when we inherited the country in 2010, there was no money left. So the first 5 years was about fixing that. Since 2019, we promised an extra 20,000 police officers there on the streets. That's an extra 20,000, 1,500 recruited in Avon and Somerset, 558 extra officers. So we have completed that manifesto promise, and the 8,000 is taking that further. But what we need to do is make sure that we're keeping working on the other things that are causing crime. And like I say, in Glastonbury in particular, we need to make sure that the public space protection order is actually in place and working to give the police the teeth that they need.
I think it's just really one for you rather than... there's a question.
Oh no, I think we should answer. The gentleman asked us all to...
Sorry, I'll come back to it, sorry. Go on.
But I have a young son, younger on the right side really, very sensitive, intelligent child. And I remember when he was in nursery school, he loved me with Mummy, and I were a girl. And as a young child, I've been able to protect him from such forces
chemical castration that many politicians are in love with to stop. Which party would stop the chemical castration and confusion leading to mental illness of our young? They do not need to be sexualized. I don't think we need to see a month of pride flags as we had in the street. No mention of D-Day. What's going on? Why are our schools sexualizing and politicizing our young?
Okay. Get that. So the question is, why are schools sexualising and politicising sexuality? I think is the main. Yes, is that what you heard?
Yes.
Yeah. Okay. So I'll ask Tom to answer that first, and then Sarah, and then Faye.
Yeah, I think with the recent CAS report and the research that's coming out of the Netherlands in the respect that if you look at gender dysmorphia, so that sense of when you're young and there's a difference there between your sex and your gender, that's something that generally now has been proven that most grow out of. So by the time of age 25, it's sort of 1 in 25 that still struggle. And at the age of 15, it's about 1 in 10. And of course, anyone that struggles, I have absolute sympathy and compassion for. But I just think that conversation in terms of, sexual identity, even sex education to a certain extent, is just something that could be pushed back to a later age and not something that has to be put in front of teenagers or younger, and for them have to make life-changing decisions on potential irreversible puberty blockers. So I think it's really important that as a school, it's not taught, and that's something that could be discussed later in life when the brain has matured. Yes. Yes.
The vast majority of people in this country agree that we need to make sure that everyone's rights and dignity are respected. Children have been let down by low standards in care, and waiting lists are just too long. But do you know what? We need to have a good faith conversation about ensuring everyone's safety and dignity. This whole debate has become far too toxic and hostile.
Well, like Tom, I welcome the CAS report, and I think that it was a long time in coming, but it was right that they took the time they did to get the detail they did, and we should be looking to roll out the recommendations from the CAS report. The guidance was given very clearly to schools last year about how to manage these conversations, that parents should always be included, that children shouldn't be introduced to non-age appropriate content, and that parents have the right to know what is being taught to their children around these subjects. I agree this isn't something that we need to be hostile about, and I think the CAS report has done a very good job of giving us scientific evidence that we can work through. Schools have now got the guidance for what they need to do. Parents must be included, and from that we can move forward. But I welcome the fact that we are embedding biological sex to clarify within the law. Everybody should have a safe space, but biological sex is something that needs to be protected. And that's something that ties in with what I was talking about, the violence against women and girls and the work that we're doing to bring down those crime levels.
Anyone want to make any comment?
We've been for 20 years.
As a farmer and a conservation farmer who has rewilded part of a 150-acre farm in Butley, there's been little support from this current government, and I'd like to ask candidates where food security in this country is absolutely paramount. It should be paramount not just to put food on people's plates, but the cost of living in terms of food security. How does any candidate propose that we can give volunteers an opportunity, as plot gate is done, for instance, in Barnes and David? I know that Sarah has visited plot gate, where we can get more young people and older people working in farms and understanding the real farm issues, because even us in the Green Party, I have huge respect for, don't understand the real problems that we as farmers are facing at the moment, with the cost of prices hiked up all the way through. Thank you very much.
So as a founding director of Plot Gates, I'm very glad that Sarah visited it.
Several times.
I think that it's absolutely imperative that people produce food and get involved in the production of food when they're consuming food too. And I'm very interested in cooperative forms. A CSA, Community Supported Agriculture, is a wonderful idea. And that's why I supported Dan and Amy in getting that founded in the first place. But our agricultural policy is to work with farmers to improve our food and farming security and to increase the amount of food being produced in this country, because it's a no-brainer, isn't it? It reduces food miles, and also there is plenty of land available for production. We need to also, as a party, we're going to triple the amount of funding that's available for farmers in this country and push for biodiversity and soil health. Thank you.
Anyone else wants to respond to that particular?
Yeah, no, I would like to. Again, as a farmer's daughter, this is something that is very important to me. You know, and Somerset, we've got a rich heritage of our farming communities in Somerset, and I'm really concerned about the future. I've already said that we're only about 50% food secure. You know, farming and the improvement of farming was one of the very few, and probably the only Brexit benefit that I could ever come up with. But the British standards are being undermined. You know, our quality is constantly undermined. We were told that there'd be an increase in support and less bureaucracy, and new markets would be opened. And the government have also said that there's going to be levels of funding that would be maintained. But instead, there have been botched trade deals and botched transition to the new environmental land management scheme. Many farmers are on the brink. 110,000 have closed their gates since 1990. Let's not allow any more to close, because our British farmers are the backbone of our countryside.
Yeah.
Thank you. Well, I'm glad to hear that Sarah and I agree that Brexit has actually given us the opportunity to restructure the way we work with farmers.
It was the one Brexit benefit that hasn't happened, Faye.
Food security is extremely important. It's one of the three parts of security that a government needs to do: national security, energy security, food security. I welcome the fact that we have pledged an extra £1 billion so we can uplift those farmers' grants over the course of the next Parliament. 2.4 billion was what was spent under the Common Agricultural Policy. We're currently at 3.7, and there are schemes that are working well within that. I recognise from the many farmers that I talk to that it's not all working perfectly, and my job as your MP is to feed that back in and make sure that loops in, because the money is there, the will is there. We need the food security, we will set that within law, but we also know, and farmers know, that biodiversity works when they're producing our food as well.
Hal, do you want to come in at that point?
Yeah, thank you. Just quickly. The government has absolutely taken farmers for granted. I grew up at general election time seeing Tory signs lining the fields along the roads. Not this time.
You're a Liberal Democrat.
No comment on that one, Sarah. If elected, I'd like to sit down with farmers. I'd like to visit Plotgate, absolutely. And on food security, I'm proud that the Labour Party has set out in our manifesto a plan for half of all food purchased across the public sector to be locally produced, so we can buy local and buy British to support our British farmers.
Okay, we're going to move on now to education. Be no surprise to you whatsoever. Tom, I'm sorry I missed you there, but you can come in first on this one if you like. So, how will you improve support for children and young people in our constituency? Funding for schools has decreased, recruitment of teachers and retention is becoming increasingly difficult. Tom?
Yeah, as a teacher of 20 years now, I can make some comment about this. The fact is recruitment has been very difficult in terms of particularly maths. I think that they've managed to recruit something like 63% of their target for the last year or this year ahead. And in terms of science, it's even worse, sitting at about 17%. So we've got to attract more people into the profession and instill that sense of respect that seems to be lost or eroded with lots of public figures, not just teachers, but police and GPs across the board. I mean, for me, when I joined, I was given a golden hello. That was £5,000, and I do think there's a chance for a cash incentive there. And in terms of increasing recruitment, we need to make sure that we have more teachers. The big thing for me, actually, when it comes to teaching, if I had one wish, it would be to abolish Ofsted. Right? It is not fit for purpose, as far as I'm concerned. I know the hard work and the love and the sweat and the tears that goes into these amazing institutions, and for Ofsted to come in and brand it in one word, I think is criminal. So for me, I would Ofsted gone. Thank you.
For each of the one microphone, I'm literally just going to, when I first asked the question, go up and down. It's much simpler. All right, so John.
So Reform will be very pleased to know that one of the Green Party's policies is to abolish Ofsted and to end the high-stakes formal testing at primary and secondary schools. But what can we do for the young people? It's extraordinary, isn't it? Glastonbury Town Council had to step in when the County Council cut all the funding for youth clubs. And we have been supporting, as a council, the youth clubs in our town. And I think that is we support that through the tax that we raise through the precept. If the county had raised tax to pay for youth clubs, they'd still be in the county. So you cannot get these services without paying for them. We would love to see more teachers. Obviously, that is something that whichever party gets into power is going to have to come true to what you've heard today. Everybody's saying that they're going to put more money into teaching. Everybody's going to say they put more resource into teaching. But will they? That's the big question. Anyway, I think it's down to local communities to help support where they can through their parish and town councils for the lack that we see from central government. And if only that would change, we wouldn't have to pay for it out of the precept. Thank you.
So I believe that education is the best investment that we can make for our children's potential and our country's future. But the Conservatives have just let our children down, they've let our parents down, and they've neglected our schools and colleges, and they've actually failed to grasp the scale of the damage that the COVID pandemic has done to our children's learning and their mental health. Now, when the Liberal Democrats took control of Somerset County Council, we uncovered a backlog of school repairs totaling £50 million, with no plan to fix those crumbling and leaky schools. And the previous cabinet member did nothing to campaign for fair funding for our schools during her term in office. Now, there's lots of schools that have really suffered. We've got Avalon Special School in Street that's lost £705,000 since 2010. Crispin School, £454,000. Brookside Community Primary School in Street, £252,000. Elmhurst in Street, £95,000. The list goes on. Our children are not getting the investment that they need.
When I was at school, it was under a Labour government, and boy, am I grateful for that now. My nieces now are at Bruton Primary, where I went, and they are facing another £51,000 of cuts in the coming financial year, £200 per pupil. Schools and our children have been battered by this Conservative government. I will support, proudly, Labour's plan for free breakfast clubs in every primary school, a mental health professional in every school, 6,500 new teachers, and the respect and the dignity in work that our teachers deserve. Look at what they're doing, the most important work in our society, supporting our children.
So as Cabinet Member for Education at Somerset Council from 2019 to 2021, I secured an extra 10% of funding for our schools. Now I'd like to secure more, but what that started to do was recognise that the model set up under Labour put more money into our city schools and saw that as deprivation rather than morality. We need to keep working to balance that up. Now, our schools do need support. All assets need to be managed, and we need to make sure there is a plan for that. And I hope that the councillors running that area now will make sure that they're using the extra funding that government is giving them effectively. But what I want to see is us as communities taking hold of education. I was a venture scout and a brownie. I didn't need to go to a state-sponsored club. I went along, I became part of the community, and that's where I learned about public service. Our education needs to work well. We've got extra teachers coming in. There are bonus payments, Tom, you'll be glad to hear, particularly in maths. My cousin's daughter has just taken one on. Our education standards are growing. We need to spend your money effectively, but I will fight to keep getting more education funding for our rural communities, because I still think there's more we can do on that balance.
Thank you. I'm sure there's lots of questions over this, so do pop your hand up if you have a question. And then Kieran, just over there. Thank you.
Yes, I'd also like to tie two questions together, because we think about education and about social care early on. On both of those, we're saying that we need more people to do the work, but we can't get people to do the work. Is that the question really of they're not being paid enough or we haven't got enough training? Or is it that we're putting the wrong priorities onto the people we're employing? We're paying too much for some people in society, take bankers for example, and too little for the other people that we actually need to help society, like teachers and like social workers.
I agree, we need to recognise the profession that is teachers. That's why we've introduced a starting salary of $30,000 for a newly qualified teacher, and those salaries will continue to increase. As I said, there are bonus payments for those going into those key areas like maths and STEM subjects, where they get additional funding for the first 3 years to try and hold people in. We do need to make sure that our schools are robust, and we do need to make sure we're retaining teachers, and the work that we can do to continue improving education and continuing to give the tools that they need will help with that retention. But we are getting people in. We do have provision for training teachers right here in Somerset, and I've seen amazing people graduate from that programme.
Anyone else want to respond to that? John?
Well, I'm not John, but I'll answer.
She keeps wearing green, I don't know why.
Messaging, John, messaging. I think simply we must fund teacher training properly so that we get the proper trainees in post and they are paid for in school. You know, schools are underfunded and we've got a huge problem with SEND provision in Somerset. That issue is escalating and the pressure that is being put on our local authorities is enormous. There isn't enough money coming down from central government to be able to support our local authorities delivering the vital services that we need, and children's education is absolutely fundamental to that.
Though I think this comes down purely, as so many things do in this, to political will. When we keep voting for people who have absolutely no idea about your life or my life, and we put them into Parliament and they form a government and they don't know anything about the way that we live, then we're going to get the rewards to the wrong people. We need to get people into the House of Commons who are common people, who understand what our lives are about and will treat with respect the right people, such as the teachers and the nurses and the doctors. But because without that, it won't change. So keep on voting the way you've always voted, and you'll always get what you've always got.
I would just like to add a quick comment on the education side. I used to be a member of the career service at Somerset, one of the best career services in the country. But having said that, my question is something totally different, which is not being touched on at all. And that is the fact that the Foreign Secretary a few months ago said, look, we are spending a lot of money on helping Ukraine, obviously, which obviously affects also our
Sorry, is this, just for a minute, is this related to education?
Yeah, okay.
Thank you.
Okay. Well, I'll stick with the career service now.
Okay, all right, sorry. Come back in a while.
Okay. I just say that it was a great help for social mobility, and it made sure that everybody thought their plans through, and there's a critique for that. Anybody?
Thank you.
Other people do it.
Question over there, Kieran, please.
My concern, and what's on the basis of many difficulties in education and in the manifest themselves in antisocial behaviour, is that there are so many forces, subversive forces, working on many of our children who don't have a proper role model. I mean, my role model when I was a child was Bobby Sharp. He spent his whole career being booked only once. He wasn't paid £250,000 a week. He was a wholesome role model. And there are so many things that youngsters can access on the internet, which make them into subversive beings, and they make life very, very difficult for their teachers. You can have the best teacher in the world, but if you have a youngster who is not willing to behave because he's seen it in a role model, it becomes an impossible job. I would like to know whether any of the parties have plans to circumscribe further what youngsters can access on the internet and some of these subversive speaking.
Okay.
Yeah.
Okay, so Faye and then Tom.
So the online safety bill is the start of this, but it is only just the beginning. And that lays out ways to protect young people online. And I've seen some really good programs within our schools as well, teaching young people how to be safe on the internet and teaching their parents what that means as well. I think that we're seeing some really interesting research coming out around mobile phone usage. And certainly I was absolutely dismayed when my son came home, age 12, saying, well, they told us to set up a Facebook account and just lie about our date of birth. Now, that was a long time ago, and I don't think that happens anymore, but we need to make sure that the rules are in place, that the rules are enforced. And I think the online safety bill puts that onus back on some of the companies that's about. When it comes to role models, absolutely, we all need more of those. I've been really lucky to have some great ones in my life, and I hope to be able to serve as a role model to others if I do well.
Yeah, first and foremost, reform would ban all smartphones in schools under the age of 16. I know there's some concerns there about sort of safety walking back and forth from school, but you can get what they call a dumb phone, which basically only texts and can make phone calls. I think the whole social media is something that I think we all wish we could roll the clock back on and put the genie back in the bottle, because as far as I'm concerned, the large companies, your Facebook, your Snapchat, the list goes on, are taking no responsibility for the content that is being put out there. And I think the whole thing, again, needs to be looked at in terms of more child-friendly apps. Maybe these apps need to be age-restricted, but it certainly should be the case that children are not allowed to access a lot of the material, as you say, subversive, and really promotes bad behaviour.
I think it's a really important question. There is absolutely no doubt that the social media companies, these conglomerates, massive companies, have absolutely been able to get away with, frankly, murder. And the online safety bill, though Faye is right to mention it, has been beset by delay after delay and is littered with loopholes. Labour has fought hard in Parliament to strengthen it, and I'm proud of that. It needs to go further. We need to hold these social media companies to account and protect our children.
Schools being defunded, our teachers being demoralised, what are your parties going to do to give the state children a level playing field and the education and aspirations that only private schools seem to get?
I will start. This is something I'm very excited about. Labour will move towards levelling the playing field between private schools and our state schools by ending the VAT tax exemption on private school fees.
I had a real eye-opener when I was first Mayor of Glastonbury. I had the great honour, and I got invited to Millfield School to one of their special events. And I was sat there looking at all these kids doing amazing things, and I was trying to work out what was so different to the school that I went to. And I just realised that they had such a great opportunity. They had opportunity to do so many more things than I ever did. And that's wrong. And I don't think that there should be tax breaks for the private schools. I think that they should pay their tax along with everybody else. I think that the money that we raise from the super rich and all those people who are part of the elite should go to help fund everybody else's children in their schools.
So just one point on this whole taxing the super rich. I would love to, but money is mobile and we need to be practical about what we can achieve. What the Labour Party are suggesting will mean that our schools, our state schools, are under pressure because there are many, many small independent schools across this constituency and Somerset that are already seeing students start to look to leave. And we do not have the capacity within state schools to take these children on because it's a fine balance between enough spaces to use the money effectively. I want every child to have a good level of education. But what we will do by taxing aspiration is break the bursaries that are seeing young people get opportunities they would have never got in their life. And I want to see those opportunities happen. We need to make sure state schools work, but it shouldn't be about a politics of envy. It should be about making sure that people can access education that is good. And if those people want to pay for it, then that can happen too.
Okay. Yeah, well, the Liberal Democrats want to see an education system that enables every individual to fulfil their potential with that level playing field for all our pupils. We'd invest in an education system that improves our state schools so that they're as attractive to parents as independent schools are. But we also support parental choice, and parents shouldn't be penalised for choosing to send their children to a private school, because we have to remember it's not just the really wealthy that choose independent schools to educate their children. I've already mentioned the SEND issue that we have here, particularly in Somerset. So there's a lot of children who goes to private schools who have special educational needs and disabilities, and they do choose independent schools because of the smaller class sizes and the additional support that's available. But we need to level up and make sure that all our children have access to a great education.
Thanks. There is no money, not enough money for any public service. I guess something everybody agrees on today. And Brexit is being credited with a shortfall for Treasury of about £30 billion a year, which will increase with the passage of time. Is there any way this country will ever balance the books again if we don't rebuild our trading relationship with Europe and undo the damage that has been done by the travesty of Brexit?
Perhaps it seemed right time to ask you first to respond to that.
Yeah, I mean, for me, here we are, 2024, 8 years after we held a referendum, a democratic process, and if you're interested, I voted to remain. But I just think we need to move on and go past that now and accept the fact that we are where we are. Because the thought of going back in and the uncertainty that causes to businesses and investment, I think we need to complete the job and leave Europe completely. Not to say we can't trade with them, not to say we're not part of Europe, but the idea of going back in, I think, is a mistake. Pardon? Yeah.
So it is interesting. I did wonder why I was agreeing so much with with the Reform candidate, and now I might have worked out why. You do know your party was called the Brexit Party before it was called the Reform Party?
I did, yeah.
Right.
Yeah, I did.
Okay. I agree with everything the statement that was just made, and I think that it wasn't a democratic thing that happened around Brexit. We were lied to. We were lied to left, right and centre. Everything that was said was a lie. I think that we should, now that we've experienced what it's like, I think we should go back to another referendum and people might vote a bit differently, and I certainly would support that.
Well, I'm a Liberal Democrat, so of course I want to see the UK back at the heart of the EU. But we have to make sure that we take a pragmatic approach to that. Of course we want to see the UK back into the single market, but what we've got to do right now is to focus on fixing the damage that the Conservatives have made of all those botched trade deals. We need to make sure that we have the ability to be able to trade with our closest neighbours and be able to trade sensibly and give our businesses the right opportunities, our farmers the right opportunities. And do you know what? Free movement is an issue as well, isn't it? Immigration is far, far higher under the Conservatives today than it ever was when we were in the UK. The government hasn't got any control over what is going on.
So I voted to leave, so I'm probably the only person on the panel who did. And I voted to leave because I'm proud to be British. And I'm proud in my time working overseas, I saw how much the British brand was welcomed. And when you look at the trade deals that have been done, over 73 with individual countries, we've got the fastest growing economy in Europe, and over £427 million worth of growth. If you look at the figures, you can Google it and go onto a website, you will see all the figures there. I'm not going to sit and spout them. There are still many benefits still to be realised. After Brexit came COVID, we've got work going on, there's a lot more to be done. And if you want to go back and be regressive and look to a trade deal or something that will never be the terms that we left on, then vote Liberal Democrat. But if you want us to move forward as a country and actually get the best benefits that we can, then we need to do that.
Now, I was too young to vote, but I would have voted Remain. And Faye, I am proud to be British. I'm also very proud to be. I also am very proud to be European. I am proud that Labour will. We need to re-engage with Europe. They are our closest friends and our best of friends and closest neighbours. We need to re-engage properly. We've been disgraced on the international stage.
Yeah.
It's got to end.
Sue, am I assuming we're going back to education, or are we carrying on with the Brexit conversation?
Both.
Okay.
I find it really interesting how separated all the different issues are. Mental health is often a result of either poor situations in families, abuse, lack of respect for smaller minorities of different kinds, and lack of respect to individual other people when speaking to them. And that is happening every day here. Most of the things and issues that we've heard, people are not being heard. They're not being heard that they need mental health help for their children. They're not being heard that they need a dental appointment. Something that hasn't been mentioned here, but I think waiting list in Somerset, but I can find out about the fact that people are excluded by how bureaucracy functions, and the fact that different issues are not actually put together and looked at as one situation, which is one society which needs a great input of compassion
humanity, equality, and mutual care. Now, we've discussed incredibly important issues this evening, and one of them which has always touched me is youth and education. I've been involved with youth issues since the early 1960s, and various other health, healing and therapy issues. And it just seems to me that there are two issues that deal with this that are, if you're an individual...
Sue, sorry to interrupt you. Do you have a particular question for the
I'm
panel?
just coming to my
Right, thank you.
Well, I'm with it again. The issue when you do that is that unless you get a counsellor, and I've been a counsellor, we've had a man here and I know this, you often don't get the help you need, or if you get somebody important on the television or an MP, you suddenly get what has been ignored before. To me, that is absolutely abhorrent. But I have another issue that surrounds it, which is around the question, which is that you're missing, or seem to be missing, the most crucial issue of all, particularly to those of us in Somerset, constituency that you'll be representing, and that's to do with climate change. It's the most crucial issue there is, because it affects all the other issues. And
Sue, I'm sorry, I am going to stop you there. Climate change jumps from what we're talking about. So
my question is, here in Somerset, we're on the front line of sea level rising. Are you planning a UK Commission who will work together and work with communities to address all these issues as one thing and not as separate things, also to deal with the adaptations needed in all these ideas if climate change overtakes us without due care?
I think we'll hold that just for now, please. And we just get thank you, Sue, for what you've said. Yes, please.
Hi, I'm a sick woman at one of the crumbling schools. I try to say about how everyone else morale has gone down so much. The teachers, they can't even afford, even the experienced teachers can't afford their own home. And you said that you have recently put the wage experienced teachers have had up. However, schools can't actually fund that. And so teachers are leaving the school, going into different sectors with their degrees, where they'll actually be paid enough to live. And I just don't understand how you can think of not raising taxes and increasing the funding going to schools. Like how you can actually do anything about it when it affects all the students. If you don't have the teachers, you still have the teachers teaching maths and stuff like that. I'm lucky because I'll be leaving soon, but my sisters, they're still in school and they're still going to experience this, and it will affect them in the future because they won't be able to get the grades necessary that they need compared with the private schools, which get so much more money due to the fees and everything. I just don't get how it's fair on us state students.
Yeah, sure. I agree with everything that was said. Thank you for your question and for your comments. As I said, it's time to level the playing field. Well, actually, we would barely do anything to level the playing field, frankly, because of how far the advantaged private school, privately educated pupils, they're miles ahead. But as I said, VAT fees, no more.
They say there's no magic money tree, but when there's a war somewhere and they need a lot of arms, suddenly there is a magic money tree. What we need is for the government of the day to invest as much in state schools as the parents invest in Millfield.
I'm sorry to hear that you've got teachers who are leaving. The money I talked about was to get teachers into education, and it's fully funded. And that money has gone to schools, and the increases that have gone to teachers in the negotiated pay deal over the last years have gone to schools as well. There are additional pressures on schools for the funding that they have. And one of the things that I support is the academies and how they can strip out some of that red tape and allow our individual schools to actually focus on education. And a good academy will do that. Bad ones don't. And if I become your MP, I will be straight up to the Regional Schools Commissioner to talk about some of our underperforming academies. But we do need to make sure that money in all of our public services is going on the service rather than red tape, and some of the investment into the NHS for productivity and other areas is really important that we continue so that we can do that.
So just before I come to you, Tom, I was glad somebody's mentioned academies, and you said that academies, from your point of view, are here to stay. In this town, we have 3 schools. We have an infant school, a junior school, and a senior school. And the secondary school is with an academy, but actually far-fetched over to Minster Norton. And the other 2 schools are not, and we are being forced, and I use that word, to join academies. So I'm going to ask please the other 4, if you were elected, and indeed if you're in government, are academies here to stay, or will they go, please? I'll start off with you, Hal, and then just work down the line. Thank you.
Yeah, I'll go. Who?
Yeah.
Sorry, me. Start down here and then work.
Labour absolutely opposed the academisation of our schools. I remember it happening. I went to an academy just after it happened. I don't think we've got plans this term of government to get rid of academies, but it's definitely something that I would support looking into going forward.
Academisation is really interesting. I've been out to many schools across the constituency, and you know, I see some that are working really, really well. Others simply aren't, and there isn't a set protocol, and I think we've got a lot of learning to do to make sure that we get it right. Some teachers are finding, some heads are finding that they're finding it's difficult because they're losing that autonomy of teaching within their own school environment, but others say to me that actually it's a real benefit because there's that cost spread benefit and those economies of scale that schools find as a result of it. But I think what we've got to do is take a very cautious approach to make sure that the academies are delivering for our children.
Very simply, I would be inclined to agree with Hal.
Yeah, just going back to that point that you raised about retention of good teachers, I think that's a real issue because the fact is a number of teachers come into the profession, and not necessarily for the salary because it's never going to be that well paid, but certainly for doing something that has a purpose. And how many jobs out there that really have that great sense of purpose? So, but why do they leave? Really, it comes down to a number of things. It's the workload, the stress that's put on them by the management. When I left Crispin, I was at Crispin for about 8 years. They were bringing in triple marking, so you had to mark it, and then the student responded, and then you responded again, on and on forever. So I think there are certain things that could make their work-life balance a lot easier. Dealing with behaviour, and quite often it was the parents that were worse than the actual children. But certainly that reform talk about the idea of doubling the number of PRUs to allow those students to step away that need a... Sorry? Oh, where you'd send a student if they have SEND or behaviour issues, essentially, PRU, like Tor School in Glastonbury. Can I just finish? Yeah, double the number of PRUs and remove that behaviour issue. Just quickly touching on academies, I'm not a big fan of those, and especially I don't like the fact, an example is the Harris Foundation up in London, where the chief executive, or whatever title he's given himself, is on about £350,000 a year, and I think anyone in the public service should not be on that amount of money.
It's hard to believe, I'm afraid, that it's almost 9:30. I know that there are lots of questions people wanted to ask. We haven't touched on such things as Ukraine, Gaza, lots and lots of different things, but we did say we'd finish about 9:30. And so I have one last question for each of you. Many of you will know that I am leaving here in Glastonbury in the middle of August, and one of the questions that was asked of me at my interview is what would I do in the first week, the first month and the first year. I'm not going to quite ask you that, but I am going to ask each one of you of what you would do in this constituency for not just Glastonbury but the whole constituency within your first month. I'm going to start, please, with Faye and work down. You've got no more than 2 minutes, I'm afraid.
So the first thing I would do is make sure I've got an office set up that means that people get responses, because when people write to their MP or get in touch with their MP, they deserve to know that that has been registered. So a team who can do that and can work with me to support people is key. The second thing I would do is make sure I was out and about within our communities, talking to key groups like the NFU, like teachers, like the Regional Schools Commissioner, like our town councils, and having those conversations to continue what you've been telling me on the doorstep, to see what we need to do, what I need to do as your MP to deliver for you, because that's what I've done throughout my career, is look at challenges and deliver results, and that's what I will do for you if I become your MP.
Thank you. I would, from the off, make sure I have a visible presence in the community across our quite sparse constituency. I would keep on knocking on doors, maybe without the rosette in the first month, but just talking to local people, keeping myself grounded and finding out, continuing to find out what really matters to you. I would also be very busy in Parliament supporting Labour's transformative agenda for the country, like a New Deal for working people, 6,500 new teachers, 8,500 new mental health professionals, and a green prosperity plan to get our economy growing and saving our environment.
So I have an advantage that I've been an MP for the last 10 months. So I already have an office, I already have a staff. I've already dealt with over 6,000 pieces of casework during my time. I've already spoken 94 times in Parliament, and compared to 2 other MPs that were elected on the same day as me, the Conservatives have spoken 24 times and the Labour MP has only spoken 31 times, and I've spoken 94 times. So I will get up there and represent my constituents in Parliament, taking on all of the issues that we have going on here in Glastonbury and Somerton. People can't get a dentist appointment. People can't see a doctor. I'll help get this dirty, stinking pollution out of our rivers and give you the representation that you deserve.
So I've had the privilege of being a town councillor here in Glastonbury, but I don't know what the issues are for most of the people in the other places. Obviously, there are issues that cross the board, but I would like to get out in the first month of being the MP and listen to the communities. And I've got the advantage of being trained as an active listener on the Cabinet Office's Community Organisers Programme, and I would just go out and door knock in Wincanton, in Bruton, in Martock, in Langport, in Somerton, and listen to the people and find out what their issues are so I could better represent them in Westminster.
Is this the last question? Is this the last question? Yeah. Yeah, first month. So specifically for Glastonbury, I would want to see where this £22 million has been spent on the Town New Deal. That's
Talk to me later.
Okay. I'd want to unblock this objection that's been lodged against the pharmacy. I understand it's the one down at Feversham Lane that's stopping that, so that would be something else I would do straight away. Also going forward for me, just this sense now actually of finding a way forward with common sense practical solutions, rather than talking about the last 14 years of a Tory government. I just would rather just draw a line in the sand and find a way forward with some common sense solutions, not based on wokery or political correctness. I dream of a country where, regardless of age, race or religion, we can start to find a way forward together, so that we start to find what we have in common rather than looking for our differences. And we've got to find a way to get this cost of living down. So in terms of raising the tax threshold, lowering the energy bills by removing the VAT and the renewable subsidy, and then reforming public services. And then beyond that, striving for a country that has energy independence and security, and food and water security. Thank you.
Thank you. I'm sure a few of you are going away sort of regretting that your question was not asked. I do apologise, but we've only had 2 hours. Before we thank our candidates, can we please thank all those in this church who have made sure that this was possible, in particular to Kieran, who's now right at the back, who's been running around and encouraging us. Because without you, this would not have been possible. I did thank you very much for coming, and of course to our candidates. Thank you very much. I will end up by saying that regardless of who you vote for, I implore that you, your neighbours, your friends and your family exercise your right to vote on the floor.
I think a round of applause for David, our MC.
Well then, ladies and gentlemen, thanks for watching tonight's video. I'm glad you can make it. Tonight we've recorded the hustings from here in the church, St John's Church in the centre of Glastonbury. The idea being is if you couldn't make it along tonight, it's important you hear what the local candidates who you will be voting for on the 4th of July have to say. And so we came down and we've recorded the entire evening, which I'm now going to broadcast unedited, so it'll be quite long. But if you want to dip in and have a listen, then you're more than welcome to find out what these people stand for, who you will be voting for. But for now, thank you.